All right, so today we're going to be talking about contracts. Well, first of all, for in case we haven't met, my name's Lori. I am one of the coaches, and once a month I take over the workshop from Brittany, and I do a class on contracts, and I usually rotate between them. And so today we're going to be doing the residential listing agreement, and so I'm going to pull that up on my screen. I'm going to share it with you. I'm going to go over it. We're going to talk about it in a lot of detail. All right, so the thing about the listing agreement, and you'll find this with the purchase agreement and the buyer's rep agreement, is that they add, CAR adds certain disclosures to the beginning of those forms. And so these disclosures are mandatorily a part of the listing agreement or the purchase agreement or the buyer rep agreement. So there's a chance that your buyer or seller will sign some of these disclosures more than once, and that's perfectly okay. So the very first one is the agency disclosure form, or the AD. CAR takes this form very seriously, and they actually require that this be the first form that your client would ever sign. And so that's why you'll always find it at the beginning of whatever document you send to your client to sign. Not disclosures, but like the listing agreement or the purchase agreement. I'm not going to go over these ones because they're not necessarily what I'm talking about today, but I'm just pointing out that they are here. Actually, really briefly, the disclosure or the agency relationship discloses like what is a seller's agent, what is a buyer's agent, what are their responsibilities, what happens if the agent represents both the seller and the buyer, and then what are the seller and buyer responsibilities. So you should read this and go over it with your client when they sign it. And then the second page of this is civil code, and they reference it in the first page, and so they give you a complete copy of it in the second page. And so the second page doesn't get signed or anything, it's just there. And then we have the Fair Housing and Discrimination Advisory. And so basically that just says that you're not allowed to discriminate, and gives, some of the categories where discrimination can happen. Discrimination is we have to be careful when we're marketing our properties that we don't fall into or accidentally discriminate against somebody. And so, like, for example, when you say it's a great home for a family, using the word family could be discriminating against a non-married or different type of homeowner. So we have to be careful with that in our marketing. So there's an advisory there. Okay, there was something else I was going to say, but I forgot what it was. And then the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, which is also known as the PRBS form. And basically, this just says that there might be multiple buyers, multiple sellers. I might be representing more than one buyer or more than one buyer for this particular house. And so it just kind of explains all of that. And they get signed. And then the wire fraud and electronic funds transfer advisory. Basically, we just want to tell our clients that wire fraud is a real thing and advise them that, just what's on here. If they get an email asking them to wire funds, to call and verify that that is a legitimate request, but don't call the number in the email, because if it's a fraudulent email, it's going to be a fraudulent phone number. So the wire fraud advisory. And then we get into the actual listing agreement. And so the listing agreement is a total of 6 pages. The listing agreement is a contract between you as the agent, more specifically your broker, and the seller. And so even though we put certain things on the listing agreement, the buyer will never see the listing agreement. And so just because it's on the listing agreement does not make it a contract term with the buyer. And I'll show you where that comes into play a little bit later. So just know that whatever you're putting on here is basically the seller's intent, but is not a contractual term between seller and buyer. Okay, so I'm going to start with my first question, date prepared. So date prepared, obviously we're not in September. We are February 12th. What's important about date prepared? So if I am preparing this today, but the agreement doesn't go into effect until the 14th, and I'm not even going to present it to the seller to sign until the 14th. Do I put the 12th here or do I put the 14th here? Jeff, you were muted.
You put
I
the 12.
I put the 12, yeah.
Yes, we want to put the 12th. So the date prepared doesn't really matter. We're preparing it today, so we're going to put today's date. It is an important date, though, because whenever another document gets referenced, where it's referencing like the listing agreement or if it's referencing the purchase agreement and it says dated, they're looking for the date prepared. So if we were doing another document, let's say we were amending the purchase price or the listing price, and so we're doing an addendum. The addendum is going to reference the listing agreement dated. That's not the date, so we're not putting the 14th. We would put the 12th. So that's where that date is important. Okay, so exclusive right to sell. So the name of our seller, we are going to sell Taylor Swift's house because she's been in the news a lot lately and she wants to move out of my small town of Tulare. And so we're going to sell her house. So Taylor Swift is the seller, and she hereby employs and grants broker. So who is that? Is that me? Or is that Keller Williams?
It's Keller Williams.
Keller Williams. Keller Williams Realty, Tulare County. And yours would be whatever yours is. I'm in Tulare County. The beginning date. So the beginning date, this is asking what's the beginning date of this listing agreement? Normally, I will put the beginning date as the day that we're going to go live. So if I know that they're going to sign the listing agreement today, but we've got to take photos and we're going to strategically do it so that we put it on the market on Friday, then I'm not going to put today as the beginning date. I'm going to put Friday, the 16th. Some agents will put today and then they'll later on in the form they'll put the 16th, but I just put the 16th right there. I also typically make all of my listing agreements for 6 months. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's going to be through August. So we are August. We are right now, we're going to put it live on February 16th. So we could make it end on August 16th. But if we get to a point where we've got a lot of listings and maybe they become overpriced or whatnot and they expire, it's easier to keep track of expiring contracts if they all expire on the very last day of the month. So I always make my agreements end on the last day of the month. That way I only have to remember one day a month to check and see if anything's expiring. We haven't had a lot of listings expire the way the market's been the last few years, but that's still how I do it. Okay, and then we got the address. So Taylor lives at 123 Love This House Drive, and so that's the property she's going to be selling, and that's situated in the lovely city of Tulare. It's in Tulare County. And I got my parcel number. I review a lot of contracts and I see the parcel number being left off a lot of times. So you want to make sure that you got the APN number. And if you know where the dashes go, put the dashes in because it makes it easier, or it makes it less likely that somebody's going to like transpose a number if they're typing, a bunch of numbers or whatnot. The assessor parcel number, you can usually get that if you pull if you go onto a title company website and you look up the address, it'll usually have the APN number. If the home has been listed for sale in the past, you can usually find the APN number on the previous listing. If you look up a tax report, it's usually there. And then when you get it, if you happen to get a parcel map, which will come once you get the title report, I always look at the parcel map and just make sure that, yes, this is the third house over from the end of the street and make sure that it's the right number. If it's a manufactured or mobile home, then I would check this box here. And then that would automatically add the manufactured home listing addendum, or if it's going to be sold as a probate conservatorship, guardianship, or receivership, then I would mark this box and it would add the probate listing addendum and advisory. But in this case, she does not live in any of those or isn't part of that. So then we're going to go to listing price and terms. Now, when I do a listing agreement, when I do a listing appointment, I typically take this with me. I print it out and take it with me, and I have it filled out as much as I can before I get there. I like to do that because when I'm sitting down with a potential seller, I want them to be able to sign the listing agreement right then and there and not have me to, not need to leave and then try to send it electronically and then, time goes by, whatever. I might not know what our exact listing price is going to be, and so I might leave that part blank. Or just like the beginning date, I might not know when they want to actually put it on the market, so I might leave that blank as well. And then I can hand fill that out when I get there, and then it just needs to be initialed. But if you do know the listing price, let's see, Taylor's, I'm guessing, going to live in a 1.5 million house. I didn't even count my zeros there. Let me see if I got it. Oh, 15 million. Okay, she lives in a $15 million house. That might sound more realistic, right? So we're going to list this for 15 million. And you can see when I typed in the numbers here, it automatically put the language there. And then listing terms. I don't usually put anything here in listing terms. In fact, I don't think I've ever put anything there. But there is space there if you have specific terms that you want to put. Do I have any questions so far? Pretty straightforward. The other thing is when I didn't. Oh, yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Lori, yes, I have a question.
Okay.
You said that you take this printed
Yes.
for them to sign and fill out some other. Okay, so when you upload, you need to upload this document as it was, as it
So
is.
So if I print this, I'm going to have most of the information filled out. I'm only going to have just a couple of key strategic things that I'm going to have to fill out by hand when I get there. When they sign it, then I bring it back to the office and I'm going to upload it as a PDF. So you can scan it in as a PDF document and then upload it into whatever program you need to upload it into. One thing though is we do have to make sure that we're leaving copies of whatever a client signs. So if they sign it by hand, you definitely have to leave them a copy as well. Did that answer your question, Rufina?
Yes, and how do you do that? Do you take two copies? They have to sign both documents, or you?
So technically, yes, you should take two documents, fill them both out, have them sign them both. Another alternative, which I don't think is the correct way to do it, is to email them the document when you get back to the office. But I think the correct way to do it is actually have two copies of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. The other thing I was going to say is, and I'm not going over it here, but I usually use the cover sheet. So in zip forms or in the car forms, there is a cover sheet. And if you fill in just very minimal information like the buyer or the seller's name, your information, the property address, it will then take all that information and automatically place it on all of the forms in the contract, which will save you a lot of time. There's a bunch of categories on the cover sheet that you will not fill out. I would say you're only going to fill out maybe 5 to 10% of the cover sheet, not 100% of it. So just keep that in mind. Okay, and then we're going to come to compensation to broker because obviously we're in this business to make money, and so we want to get paid. Notice that it says compensation to broker, not compensation to agent. And so all of these contracts are between buyer, seller, and broker. We just sign on their behalf. So it says right here that compensation is negotiable. Commission is not fixed by law. My goal anytime I do a listing agreement is to get 6%. And so I've got 6% here. I could put like a flat dollar amount and I could put, something else here. I've never done that. I just do the 6%. What you could put there, you could also put it down in number C, which I'll get to in a minute. But what you could put here, so some market centers, it's common for the client to pay the like the transaction fee, the office transaction fee. And so I could put, pay X amount of dollars towards transaction fee. If I do that though, and it's not common in my office, so I don't do it. But if you do it, then first of all, you cannot make a profit off of that. So it has to be the actual cost. It cannot be anything more than that. And if you do it for one client, you absolutely have to do it for every single other client because you could get in trouble for discrimination if you don't. So just keep that in mind if you do that. And so basically this is saying that the seller is going to pay 6% to the broker. Down at the bottom, I'll show you where we offer half of that or whatever percentage of that to the buyer's agent. And so it basically says that that amount is due if during the listing period or any extension of the listing period, the broker or a cooperating broker, seller, or any other person procures a ready, willing, and able buyer whose offer to purchase the property at any price and terms is accepted by the seller. Or if our listing agreement expires or is canceled within X number of days, so 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, if somebody who came into the property while it was listed or who submitted an offer while it was listed, if they come back and want to buy the house, if they do it within, say, 30 days here, then as broker, we still earn that 6%. So that is there to protect us, protect us. It also says, and this is interesting, that 6% is due if, without the broker's prior written consent, the property is withdrawn from sale, conveyed, leased, rented, otherwise transferred, or made unmarketable by a voluntary active seller during the listing period or any extension. So basically what that says is if the seller changes their mind and has not gotten written consent from the broker, then the broker has earned their 6%. Now, we are in a reputation-based business, and we're not in the business to force people to pay us for services that we don't provide, even though maybe up to that point we had provided some services. So it's highly unlikely that your broker would utilize this, but this is part of the contract. Any questions on any of that?
If we as listing agents incur in expenses, I have no idea what kind of expenses would that be, but just in case we have expenses that we have made, and could we ask for those expenses? Or
I mean, you could ask. They wouldn't have to say yes. And so you might have marketing expenses. You might have, printed flyers. You might have, ran social media ads. So yeah, you could definitely have some marketing expenses, which part of that is that's just the cost of doing business. And hopefully in the process of marketing this home, you were able to pick up some new buyers or sellers or leads. And so that in that aspect, it would have essentially paid for itself, hopefully. I do have something right here. And so what I have here is on number C, in addition, seller agrees to pay broker. And so I always write in reimburse cost of professional photos only if seller cancels agreement. So when I take a listing, I pay for the professional photos up front. And that's just, I figure that's cost of having a listing, right? But if the seller changes their mind, not if, it's overpriced and we don't sell it in 6 months, but if they change their mind, they are agreeing here to reimburse me for that cost. And I've used that one time. I've had a seller one time right when interest rates started going up, and then they just couldn't sell their house for the price that they wanted, and so they canceled it, and they reimbursed for the cost of the photos. Now, when I put this in here, I tried to make it so it fits on this one line, which is why it's worded a little bit funky, because otherwise it'll go into a separate overflow addendum, and I don't want it to, add another page or two. So I just put it like that. And then number D is where we tell the seller how much of that 6% we're going to give to the buyer's agent, or the buyer's broker. And so I like to do half. And so here I'm telling them that I'm going to do 3% to the buyer's broker. And then here it says broker is authorized to cooperate with and compensate brokers operating outside of the MLS as per broker's policy. So sometimes you'll see in the MLS that it's offering 2.5% or 3% to the buyer's agent, but only if they're part of the MLS. And so they're giving us permission here, or stating right here that, per the broker's policy, it can go to agents outside of the MLS. On number F, seller represents that seller has not previously entered into a listing agreement with another broker regarding the property unless specified as follows. So if, this is important, we want to know if we're taking a listing that they don't already have it listed with another agent, or if they did have it listed, we want to verify that that has expired, is indeed an expired listing. And then seller warrants that seller has no obligation to pay compensation to any other broker regarding the property unless the property is transferred to any of the following individuals or entities. So up here, where I had written that within 30 calendar days, if the seller enters into a contract with a person who, entered and was shown the property or submitted an offer, this is where I'm tying that in. So the only way that this 30 days works, or 90 days, or whatever you put, is if the broker has given seller a written notice of such names of such prospective buyers. So if I know that Joe Smith was interested, but they didn't actually submit an offer, and this listing agreement expires, I'm going to give the seller a form that says, hey, if Joe Smith comes back in the next 30 days and wants to buy this house, that's because of my efforts, and I would still get compensation for that. So if that's the case, it would be like with another agent. If another agent had given them a notice, let's say this was an expired listing, and they know that if Joe Smith comes back and buys it, then they would put Joe Smith here. And that way I know that even though I've now taken this new listing, if Joe Smith comes and puts in an offer, I'm not getting paid for it because the other agent's getting paid for it. Now, I know that gets a little bit confusing when I start talking about another agent expired listing. So did that all make sense, or do you guys have questions on that?
Do you give a list of all the clients that you contacted? I mean, I'm not talking about Joe Smith. I'm talking about the clients that after 30 days may want to buy the property, and you contacted them through the process.
I'm not sure I'm understanding the scenario.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about the clients that we as agents generated during the process, and then we are allowed to earn money if they buy. Do you give a list?
Yeah. So if you have a listing and it expires, and you had these people came in and saw it, these people came to the open house, these people submitted offers, but they weren't accepted. Like, you can put a list of all of those people. So the list can be as big as you want it to be. But it has to meet the criteria of, they physically entered and were shown the property. They submitted an offer, and if you give them that list and then they go and list it with another agent, then yes, instead of putting names here, we would attach another document. If I've got 20 names here, we would have to do 20 names. If I only do 19 names and that 20th person comes in and buys it, too bad for me because I didn't put that 20th name.
Thank you.
Can I
Okay.
ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So when you have your listing, because obviously the names won't go down during the signing of the listing agreement because you haven't shown anybody it yet. So it
Correct.
would be wise of you, being the listing agent, anybody that's physically been there or has written offers, to write their names down on the side and then just have that on deck just in case.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And this is so on number C up here, no, on A2 right here, where I put the 30 days. This is in advance. So this is just saying if this listing expires, um, I'm saying that I have 30 days, you know, if I give you a list of names, I have 30 days to basically claim ownership of them as a buyer, right? This down here would only be done if this was an expired listing. So if this listing was somebody else's listing and it expired, and then this is the seller saying, oh, hey, my other agent claimed these people. And so they're letting me know on the listing agreement that there are some potential buyers that are already claimed by another agent.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
But
Okay.
Lori, there's forms for that too, right? Or like specific form that if
Most
you've got more than
There probably is. I don't know for sure, but there probably is. There's forms for everything.
I think there is that you can submit to the seller, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, what it says.
On.
Let me see what it says here. Yeah, it just says that they've given written notice, but there's probably a form. And then it
Can't think
says,
that there is.
yeah, it says that if the property is sold to anyone listed above during the time the seller is obligated to compensate another broker. So in other words, if we sell it to Joe Smith, that we, the broker, are not entitled to compensation under the agreement, and we're not obligated to represent the seller in that transaction. So basically, they would go back to their old agent and have that old agent represent Joe. So we're not going to get paid, but we're not going to have to do any work. So that's what that says there. Okay.
Just thinking ahead, like for example, this was it Joe Smith buys the house on the 33rd day, let's say. What do you think?
Then if it's on the 33rd day, they've only claimed them for 30 days. And so we are good to represent Joe Smith or to represent the seller with Joe Smith's agent.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Now, when we're talking about 30 days versus 33 days, you know, it can kind of get a little bit messy there, but technically by the contract, 30 days does not equal 33 days. So, so in that case, if like you wouldn't have to, but you might still do the transaction, but still give the other agent, you know, the expired listing agent a referral fee just to keep everybody happy. Maybe, maybe not when it's, you know, the difference of 3 days, right?
I think so too. It looks kind of wait until the 30 days are gone. So it's yeah, the referral fee is a good advice. Yes.
Yeah. And a lot of times the referral fee will be like there's no standard referral fee, but a lot of times it'll be 25%. And maybe in a scenario like this, you do 10% instead of 25 or something like that. But you don't even have to, and it's up to the brokers and you know, all of that. I'm just saying something to keep in mind, which might be why instead of putting 30 days, you put 60 days or 90 days. You know, there's no exact number that has to go there. And that, you know, probably doesn't come up very often, but it could come up. It's in the contract. So, you know, that's why I'm discussing it. So then we come to section 4, which is items excluded and included. So in this particular case, they are going to exclude the chandelier and the water softener system. So when Taylor sells her house, she is going to take the chandelier with her and she's going to take the water softener system, but she's going to leave the refrigerator. So what's important about these two things?
That you know to put it in the listing, and that you got to add it to the RPA when somebody puts an offer in.
Yes, exactly. So we want to put it in the agent notes in the MLS. We should put chandelier and water softener system reserved by seller, refrigerator to convey with sale, or refrigerator to stay, however you want to word it. But just because it's here and just because we put it in the agent notes in the MLS, even if we put it in the public remarks, it doesn't become a contract term unless it's in the RPA, or the residential purchase agreement. And so if we get an offer and the offer doesn't mention anything about these, we need to do a counter offer just to say that the seller reserves the chandelier and the water softener system. And as far as the refrigerator goes, even though we want it to stay, the buyer might not want the refrigerator. And so that could technically be a negotiation term, because the buyer might say, no, I don't want the refrigerator. And then the seller would just need to get rid of it in another way. So what is good practice is when you take the listing agreement, you obviously have a copy of it. And so when you start receiving offers, pull out the listing agreement. And, maybe you previously like highlighted some of this stuff, but go back in the listing agreement and say, okay, was there anything that the seller intended that I need to make sure carries over to the purchase agreement? Right. And in this case, yes. Because if you don't, then you've got unhappy seller and buyer, because buyer thinks they're keeping these things, seller thinks they're keeping these things. Agent might end up paying money to one or the other just to make everybody happy. And so these are important things. It does say here though, and we want our clients to read what they're signing, and we know that a lot of times they don't. But here it says seller intends that the above items be excluded or included in offering the property for sale, but understands that the purchase agreement supersedes any intention expressed above and will ultimately determine which items are excluded and included in the sale. Broker is not responsible for and does not guarantee the above exclusions and or inclusions. Will be in the purchase agreement. So that's our little out. And at the same time, we're there to do what the seller wants us to do to best represent them and their intentions. And so we want to make sure that we're getting these into the purchase agreement. The other thing that we want to mark is, do they have any leased or not owned items or any liened items? So like the solar power system, do they own it or are they leasing it? Windows, doors, alarm, like whatever. So we want to ask those questions and make sure that we've got them here, because if they don't own it, either the buyer's got to take the responsibility of it when they purchase the house, or the seller's got to pay it off in escrow. And so we need to know, those things. One of the things, it doesn't say it here, but there's like a PACE, I think it's a PACE program, where they can, I had a client one time and they had gotten new windows or doors to the extent of like $26,000. But instead of paying for it up front, it got attached to their property taxes. So every year when they paid their property taxes, they paid a higher amount because it was then paying off that through the I think it's the PACE program. I might have that wrong. But so you might ask them about that, because a lot of times they kind of forget, oh yeah, I am paying that, but I do it through property taxes, so it doesn't stand out as something that I'm paying. Okay. Same with the smart home features. So this is asking, is there anything, any smart home features that are going to be either included or excluded? And so in this case, we're going to include the Ring doorbell. Again, we're going to want to make sure that that gets conveyed on the purchase agreement and that the buyer actually wants the Ring doorbell. And with items like the Ring doorbell, sometimes there are apps and logins and stuff, and that has to be transferred also. And that can get a little bit messy if buyer or seller have a hard time doing that, because the last thing you want to do is buy a house with a Ring doorbell and your seller is still getting the notifications instead of you. Okay, any questions on any of that? Pretty straightforward. Okay. And then we're going to let them know what multiple listing service their property is going to be listed in. And so first of all, it explains what is the MLS, what information gets provided to the MLS. And then it says that the broker is a participant or subscriber to. So I'm a subscriber to the Tulare County Multiple Listing Service. I'm also a subscriber to 2 other ones in my area. I don't have to put those in here because Tulare County is like the main one, and and it shows right here that MLS is the primary MLS for the geographic area of the property. If it's not, then I would have to mark the box that says is not. So I'm notifying them whether or not their property is going to be listed in their local MLS. And that's important because if it's not listed in the local MLS, when it comes up for sale, it's not going to be like, they won't see that it's up for sale. Now they might see it on Zillow or Realtor or another app, or KW app would show it, but the actual MLS will not show it, which means the agents in that area will most likely not be aware of the property because they use the MLS. And so that's what like number D explains everything that I just said, but this has the benefits of using the MLS or the impact of opting out of the MLS, and seller has to initial it as well as us having to initial that so that their attention's being called to that. And then we have public marketing of the property. And so this talks about, says MLS rules either require or do not require that residential real property with 1 to 4 units and vacant listings be submitted to the MLS within 1 business day of any public marketing. And so my MLS does require that. I don't know if all of ours do. I would assume they all do, but you know what happens when you assume. So, and then it talks about public marketing, what public marketing includes and what it doesn't include. And so public marketing does not include an office exclusive listing where there is direct promotion of the listing between the brokers and licensees affiliated with the listing brokerage, and 1-to-1 promotion between them. So them and their clients. So what that means is that even if I'm not allowed to be marketing my listing publicly, I can tell other agents in my office about it, and they can tell their clients, and that's not considered public marketing. But if it switches over and any type of public marketing happens, I have to get it in the MLS within 1 day. Ernie, you have a question?
Well, if you do have a client that doesn't want it on the MLS or doesn't want to put out there publicly, then you leave that. Do you leave that top part blank, or you still put what MLS you're involved with, C, and then you have them sign D?
Yeah, you're still going to have them, you're still going to fill that out because you're just providing them information. They would still sign, they're not signing D, they're signing 6. So this is the benefits of using it and the impact of not using it. So they're just initialing 6 A, B, C, and D so that they've seen it. What you would use is down here, there is a SELM form, SELM, and that's where the seller instructs broker. Nope, that's not the one we're going to use. Somewhere in here, there's the way to like opt out. So you do have to.
Right below that 6, is it? Just below it.
Oh, right here.
It says clear
Okay, public marketing, clear cooperation policy. I think it's down a little bit further.
Okay. All right. So I got ahead of my, but that's what I wanted to know, where that is. If they insist that, because some insist they don't want their people coming through their house, and I don't want my pictures out there. I just want you to do it. Stupid, but whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, in that case, you can always do like you could always just do the outside of the house and not do any photos of the inside of the house, because if they don't have it on the MLS, they're a lot less likely to be able to sell it because people aren't going to see it. They're not going to know it's for sale, right? So you'd want to have that discussion with them. I had a client one time that we had it on the MLS, but she didn't want a sign out front because she didn't want her son to drive by and see it because she had a bad relationship with her son, whatnot. And so there are different options, and we want to explain the pros and cons to our clients for the different options, but they get to choose. So even if we think it's a bad idea not to be on the MLS, if they don't want it on the MLS, that's their choice, right?
Yeah.
Jim, you have a question?
So is that all we need to do to have a registered listing on the MLS?
Well, you have to then go and put it on the MLS. So you have
Right.
to enter the listing. Yeah.
But that's
So
the
I
only
mean,
form. That's all they have to do. All they have to do is not market it on the MLS. On this form, there's no separate forms or anything
to not market on the MLS or to market it.
to be able to say it's a registered listing.
Yeah, an active listing or
Registered.
what's I'm not sure the word registered.
Oh, it came out a few years ago where, like you indicated, you can market it to the agents under your brokerage, right?
Uh-huh.
It's not publicly marketed, but you can market it to agents only within your brokerage. It's considered registered.
Okay.
You can't publicly market it. You can't publicly offer a commission. At least that's what they
Okay.
came out a few years ago. If that's not the case anymore, I don't know.
Yeah, I hadn't heard
Yes.
that term and maybe they've changed the term.
Okay.
But
No, it's the same thing like a coming soon or anything, or you want putting it up right away. It wasn't going active right away. You still have to register it within 3 days with the MLS,
okay.
a
No.
listing. Maybe it's just, I don't know where you're at, but yeah, you have to register it or you can get fined.
So different
Yeah.
MLSs have different rules. Some of them are across the board, some of them are different. So you always want to know what the rules are within your MLS. And some might require within 1 day, some might require within 3 days. So you're talking about a listing that is going to be basically an excluded listing, right?
Well, the CRMLS calls it a registered listing,
Okay.
and
Okay.
it
So I'd
shows up.
have to,
It only shows up to the broker in your office and yourself. It doesn't. So on the MLS, it doesn't show. It only shows to your brokerage. It doesn't publicly market to other agents. It doesn't syndicate. You can't put a commission, but you can sell
okay.
it. It's kind of like a
Okay.
pocket. It's kind of like a pocket listing. That's what they came out with this to kind of say. Here's a good way of doing a pocket listing. You got to register it. It's not coming soon. Coming soon, you could actually market it, and you're limited to 21 days.
Well, no, but
And
if you post, like, say you post date a listing, I mean, you like somebody says, "Oh, I'm not ready to go on market for 10 days," but you're not even doing it coming soon. But if you post date that listing, you got to still, if they sign it, I mean, I got to look at the rules and everything, but I know that if you sign a listing, you got to notify your MLS within, all of them are different, but ours is 3 days. So, and it's called register. So you got to actually go let them register, let them know that you've picked up a listing, and there's certain rules and guidelines that, but
So I would just say check with your MLS if you have like a coming soon or you're excluding it for whatever purpose. Check with your local MLS just to see what the rules are because my rules might be different than your rules, and you can get fined if you don't do it correctly. And I would hate to have any of you get fined. So I would say you can look up the rules online, or you can just call them and ask them, or do both.
so, sorry, one last thing then. So CAR
Uh-huh.
has a form, a SELM form, a seller exclusion,
Yes.
right? So I don't know if we need to do that SELM form to have a registered listing. That's why I was asking, do we need to do another form to have
Yeah,
a,
and so if you look at D here, it says seller instructs broker, MLS may require car form SELM. So depending on your MLS, they may or may not require it. And then but it says that seller instructs broker to market the property to the public and to start marketing on the beginning date of this agreement. That would be the default, or on such and such date. So up at the top where I had put that, we're going to put it on the 16th. I could have dated the contract to begin today, and then down here put the 16th. So instead of putting February 16th right here, I could have put this as February 12th and then use the SELM form for February 16th. And that's more common in some areas than other areas.
okay.
okay,
But
so
then that
register.
SELM form would have to go to the MLS.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Lori. So
Yes.
I just looked it up. It says it's excluded from the MLS. It says registered in CRMLS allows guests or allows agents and brokers to submit listing contracts to the MLS in compliance with CRMLS Rule 7.8 without having to file an exclusion waiver form.
Okay.
So you can register listings is improving the process to register a listing and not put it on the MLS. So you
Okay.
can register it and not exclude it from the MLS. But they still need to know under compliance that you have a listing.
Yeah. So my recommendation again is if you have that type of situation, just reach out to your MLS, make sure you understand what their rules are. Because I could tell you my MLS rules, it might be different than yours, or yours may have changed or whatever. And that way you save yourself, you make sure you're in compliance and you're not, going to get fined for whatever reason. And so basically that's kind of what this section is. So like coming soon. So my broker doesn't like us to do coming soon. So I've never done a coming soon. And so I don't have experience on exactly like how that works. And so if you do have a coming soon, you might talk to your broker or another agent in your office just to see what the rules are and how that works. It does say in here though that like using coming soon, that could impact how the days on market calculation works. Same with the SELM form, it could impact the days on market. And so you want to make sure that you understand how that works because, you probably don't want to take a listing, you're purposely holding it off the market for 10 days. And then when you make it active on day 10, it already shows as being on market for 10 days, right? So make sure you know how your MLS counts days on market and whatnot. And then like E, right, E, it says that that should any public marketing of the property occur, the property listing will be submitted to the MLS within 1 business day. So even if the seller says, I don't want this to be publicly marketed until such and such date, but you inadvertently publicly market it, you've got to now submit it within 1 day. And then there's, if the clear cooperation policy applies, it talks about that up here, which is the whole public marketing thing. And then down here is a box if it doesn't apply. And so I would just suggest you guys read this section in detail. I mean, you should read the entire form, be familiar with what it says, but read this section in detail. And again, reach out to your MLS so you understand what is allowed or not allowed. And then it shows what data is going to be on the internet. So the property address, you can, in some instances, opt out of certain things being on the MLS. Like you can have a listing that doesn't have the address on there. That is an option. I've never used it. Some systems will have like an automated estimate of value. Sometimes we can affect whether that shows or doesn't show. Right here, seller election to opt out. Seller elects to opt out of certain internet features as provided by CAR form SCLI or the local equivalent form. I've never done that. I don't know how it works. I don't know how effective it is at the different things being opted out. But that again is something, if you're in that situation, get additional information on it. Any questions? I know I didn't have a lot of answers on that last section, but any questions on that last section? Okay. And then
you were mentioning that for some reason your the listing didn't start on the day that on the 16th, for example. No, I mean, this is my question. If for some reason the listing doesn't start on the 16th and you are on the 16th, so it's already there, and the client, the listing, the owner decides to that they need 2 more weeks, for example. What do you do in terms of
there's
change?
there's an extension of time addendum, and you can have your seller sign that, and then that would just basically change the date of when the listing goes active. But you definitely want to have them sign it though.
Okay. And what if you upload it and it has like 1 day of being there?
So in my MLS, we have to go in and actively market as going on market, and so it doesn't do it automatically. I don't know if other MLSs are like that or not.
If you do a coming soon at 21 days, it will automatically list it.
Okay.
But I think that's the only time.
Then you
Mhm.
might need to, again, talk to your MLS, see what the best procedure is, but then you might put it on hold. So it might come as an active listing automatically after the 21 days, and then you would just go in and put it on hold until the 2 weeks when they're ready to actually list it.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I
Okay.
think you, like I
Actually, I'll-
said, but you still have to register it. You have to register it and then put it on hold.
Yeah. So just
Well-
talk to your MLS, see what the rules are.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
and
just gonna
time is,
go ahead.
go ahead.
Sorry.
Time is counting? So the listing is adding days when it's on hold?
I'm not sure.
Days on market don't accumulate for hold or coming soon listings, but I was just gonna give folks a clue because I had one coming soon and used the 21 days, and I got it into contract. And when you set that 21 days, even though I put it active under contract, that automated thing that sets it from coming soon, no days on market, it put it active. So that alerted the buyer's agent. And they're like, "Hey, I thought we had a good deal." And I said, "We do." So I had to go change it back. I didn't realize the system does that to you. So just be cautious of that. Be aware of that.
Yeah. And we all have different systems, so different systems might do things differently as well. Because I have a different, I use Flex. I know some of you guys use different systems, so
It's our matrix.
yeah. So we just want to, be paying attention and know what our MLS rules are, definitions. So even like the definition of hold in one MLS might be different than it is in a different MLS. They might be exactly the same, they might be different. I don't know, but
Yeah, and
things
this is stuff that we need to find out because you can get fined for it, and they
You
do.
can- yeah, you definitely get fined for it, and the fines aren't little amounts sometimes. So, okay, so going back to the listing agreement, so we have right here seller representations. So here it says that unless it's in writing, they are unaware of like being in default, any delinquent amounts due, any bankruptcy affecting the property or any litigation. Broker and seller duties. So broker has, certain duties. Seller has certain duties. Here it talks about presentation of offer. So does the seller want to see the offers as they come in? Do they want the broker to hold the offer maybe for, 2 days or until the following Friday or whatever, and then present them? So that can be put in here. It's got what's commonly known as the buyer love letters, buyer supplemental offer letters. By default, it says that the seller instructs broker not to present buyer letters, but there is the option for them to choose to have them presented. Do you guys know why we would not want to present a buyer love letter?
Because it tends to discriminate.
It opens up your seller to discrimination. So if you get an offer and there's a buyer love letter attached, your best bet is to reach out to the buyer's agent and let them know that you will not be presenting any buyer letters, and that protects your seller.
Oh, you can also put it in the comments when you put your MLS up.
Yeah, you can do that.
Agent comments.
And then here, number E, does the seller agree to order any specific reports? Usually not. Usually they're ordered, by the buyer, or they're ordered in escrow, but there's an option there. It does say seller agrees to indemnify, defend, and hold broker harmless from all claims, disputes, litigation, judgments, attorney costs, blah, blah, blah. Talks about
Lori,
agent.
would you suggest getting the homeowners though? Because in case so you can close on time, you wouldn't be
Getting
hung
what?
up. The
You could,
the
yeah.
homeowners association documents.
That would be a good idea. That would be a good
Yeah,
idea.
so escrow doesn't get held up because that's usually the one that takes forever.
Yeah, and I don't know how long homeowner association documents are good for, but if let's say you have an overpriced listing and it doesn't sell for 5 months, is there a requirement that those have to be within the last 90 days or 30 days? I don't know the
Right.
answer to that, but that's something to take into consideration.
Right.
even on like the pest report, right? Those are only good for a certain amount of days, you know, a couple months or whatever it might be. So just keep that in mind. Here it talks about agency relationships. So this is how important CAR thinks that, or the state, the DRE thinks it is. In the very first 2 pages of this document were specifically dedicated to agency, and now they are bringing it up here again. So they want to make sure that you're really aware of agency and who's representing who. This lets the seller know that the broker doesn't have insurance, that they need to have insurance for anyone that enters into their house, that they might be taking, you know, people might take video or photos while they're there. Those might get on the internet. This gives you the authority to either install a lockbox or not install a lockbox, and lets the seller know some of the risks of having a lockbox. If it's a tenant occupied property, then you would need to make sure that you're using the tenant occupied property addendum when it goes under contract with the buyer. But here it says, seller shall be responsible for obtaining occupants' written permission for use of a lockbox. And so there's a form for that. And then right here, they either authorize or do not authorize that for sale sold sign on the property. If there's any additional terms or additional forms, like if it's a, you know, trust, or if there's going to be a contingency to buy a replacement property, these would get marked, and then additional forms would get added. Talks about dispute resolution, says this is the entire agreement. And then if it's an entity seller, then you can either fill out these boxes, or there's a completely different form to be used for entity sellers. Same with entity buyers. And then they sign it and you sign it. And then you have the seller's advisory. And what's this? Privacy Act. And then that's it. That's your listing agreement. So once you get this signed, then you have, you're under contract, you have a valid listing, and then it goes to, you know, getting it scheduled, getting photos scheduled, getting, you know, are we doing any staging on it? And then getting it, you know, up into the MLS and making it go active. So any questions? I would recommend that if you have not filled out a listing agreement in the past, that before you get a seller, that you just sit down and fill one out. And that way, the first time you're filling it out isn't, you know, when you're under the crunch of, oh my gosh, I have a listing appointment. If you're in the PC program, we are here to help you with that.
Thank you very much.
Have a great
You're
day.
welcome. You guys have a great day too.
You.